Back in 2013, Kickstarter was all the rage online. The idea of crowdfunding your own projects so that the consumers decide what they want made rather than rich investors was a pretty novel concept, with many saying that it would be the new business model of the future. Skip forward to 2020, however, and you don't hear much about Kickstarter anymore, with searches for the site only a fraction of what they used to be. Along with this, new campaigns are down by 35%, with no sign of it rebounding, leading to massive layoffs. This has led many to wonder what happened to cause the once hot tech startup to fizzle out, in only a matter of a couple years. To best understand this story, let's first go back to 2009 when the website was invented. Back then, it was pegged as a way to support starving artists as just an everyday internet user. Soon it picked up steam, being ranked one of the greatest inventions of the year, and bringing in millions of dollars in investment money to grow the platform. At first, the site was used mainly to fund creative fringe projects, the most well-known being the divisive Feminist Frequency, which the abundant coverage of really put Kickstarter on the map as a growing business. On top of this, there started to be physical products and inventions using the site to gain funding, such as the Pebble watch. Back in the early to mid-2010s, Kickstarter was a Wild West, where people could make their dreams a reality if they could convince enough backers to fund their vision. To be fair, it wasn't all well thought out pitches. There was plenty of nonsense trying to get crowdfunding as well. You had people with simply flat out stupid ideas, those without any credentials over-promising what they could deliver, and of course little kids asking people to fund their gaming PC so they could start up a YouTube channel. These were a large portion of the website. While people like pointing at this trash as the reason Kickstarter would soon get a bad reputation, in all actuality these mock campaigns almost never received any money, and only served as easy material to cringe at. It turns out the bigger problem people soon discovered is that even the legitimate campaigns would oftentimes fail. It may be true that those who start Kickstarters are legally required to provide the products and perks that backers paid for, but people would soon learn the hard way that it doesn't always mean it happened. Unlike a product purchased from a large business, in the case of Kickstarter, you're dealing with small companies without revenue. So if they mismanage the crowdfunding money and run out before the product is finished, all the backers are usually out of luck. For example, let's take a look at the Kickstarter that broke the record as the most successful campaign of all time. Coolest Cooler. I remember hearing about this in 2014. It was this cool all-in-one cooler that had a blender, speakers, storage, lights, and a bunch of other stuff built right into it. This was all over the news because they convinced 60,000 people to drop around $200 a piece to pre-order one. After they received the $13 million, the postponements started rolling in. The launch went from early 2015 to mid-2015. Then they only sent out a fraction of the ones promised. But no worries, as the rest were supposed to come in 2016. By 2017, people were still waiting, with the government now getting involved to make sure they got what they promised. Yet in 2018, people were still waiting. And eventually in 2019, Coolest Cooler closed down, with thousands still waiting to get what they paid for. Just imagine dropping $185 on a pretty straightforward product, then have to fight with the company for half a decade of your life to get it, just for them to eventually go out of business. While this is an extreme example, it just makes me wonder, what's the point of risking putting yourself through this headache just for the sake of backing something that looks kinda cool? While the concept of getting rid of the middleman investor so the creator can sell their vision directly to the consumer sounds exciting and liberating at first, you soon start to realize that a traditional financing model makes sense in many regards. We always hear the stories about the movie studio that fiddles with the director's vision, but we don't hear about the instances where the boss figure made sure that that production stayed on time and budget. Oftentimes, creative people don't have a good business sense, nor do they know how to manage a budget themselves. So if you just dropped $1 million into their laps from a ton of anonymous internet users and it was up to them to make sure they didn't blow it all in one place, is it really that surprising that things go wrong? On top of this, a lot of successful Kickstarters had private investors on top of the crowdfunding campaign, which I feel kinda takes away from the point of Kickstarter. The difference between the investors and the backers in these cases is that while the investors share in the profits of the work, the backers just get a product at maybe 20% off MSRP. This has always been a big criticism of crowdfunding since the very beginning. You're giving money to an unproven entity, but you won't share in the profits if that project turns out to be successful. In the early days of Kickstarter, I was more sympathetic to there being no profit sharing since the company had legal boundaries preventing them from offering equity as a perk. But now with websites such as WeFunder offering the ability to be a small-scale investor, just getting a free t-shirt with your product on Kickstarter doesn't feel adequate anymore. And with that, crowdfunding started to cool down as the years went on. In 2017, to diversify their business, Kickstarter launched their very own competitor to Patreon called Drip, which did seem like a decent business to branch out into, but it didn't go as well as they wanted. Firstly, the big creator that they signed on from the start was Anita Sarkeesian, who is cited in many articles about the website. I feel having such a polarizing figure to be so closely tied to the platform probably didn't help their chances of success. On top of this, Patreon had already become an industry standard for creators at this point, and without much to set them apart, the platform never took off, with it being pretty much dead if you go there now. Because of their inability to expand and the gold rush of crowdfunding being over, it appears that Kickstarter will remain a niche business rather than a big player. And their current business decisions make that very clear. In 2020, shortly after the workers unionized and the COVID-19 outbreak started, the once booming internet startup had to lay off 35% of their staff and have senior executives take a pay cut to keep the business afloat. That may seem bad now looking back at where they were 5 years ago, but in the long run I can see them remaining a small but profitable company. There will always be a place for crowdfunding on the internet, but the novelty has slowly worn off over the last decade, with many swearing off backing a product ever again after being burned by a mismanaged campaign. And that's the thing I think people have slowly figured out about Kickstarters. You should never spend money on the site unless you're fine not receiving the rewards you were promised. Time and time again, hyped up campaigns get multiple year-long delays, a subpar final product, and in the worst case scenario, no product at all. That's fine if you have disposable income and just want to watch the development of your campaign over the years. But for everyone else, it's probably better to wait for the product to release and buy it with the general public.
Je peux